Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We are here and we have the Off the Post crew, Anthony and Russ. Russ will start us off with the pre-show, and I've got something as well. So go ahead, Russ.
So I had to turn off ESPN's broadcast of the Mets-Cubs game yesterday for a few reasons. The first one, and I gave it a shot. I did. I think Gary Cohen and Keith Hernandez are wildly entertaining. But listen, I wanted to give the national broadcast a chance. So the minute you went on there, the first thing they were talking about is the crackdown on pitchers. And all of a sudden, before the game started, they're on the headphones, the umpires. And I'm thinking, are they going to nail Peterson before the game starts for the Mets because he was on the mound? And it probably was about the weather, right? It was probably because they had thunderstorms. But they made you think about that, right? And then they were like, well, today is the crackdown. Today is the day Major League Baseball says they're going to start cracking down. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing names and things happen. And they talked about they didn't say whether it was covert or they were going to be in the press box, but they said they were going to have essentially officers. They're going to have people spotting for the spider tack. And I forget the word they used. I tweeted it out yesterday, but they were going to have those people out there, right? And so I started asking people, even asked that John Boy guy, have you seen one yet? Have you seen any of these people? Are they, because writers, I know baseball writers, are they in the press box? Or are they still just the umpires and Major League Baseball made it up and they're not paying anybody extra? I think that's probably what it is.
I love the idea of a sticky spotter.
But don't you find that kind of crazy that they're like, well, we've sent this team of people out there and we're going to just crack down on everybody. And it's like,
it's not only spider tack. I saw a tweet from, I think it was Jeff Passan, was like, it's spider tack. It's a combination of rosin and suntan oil. All this, and I'm like, okay, I mean, really?
I'm thinking of Chelsea Ross in the first major league, the old pitcher.
Rub some jalapeno juice on my
juice, all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's like as this is all going on.
Yeah,
I know some of this is old school baseball, subterfuge, but it just feels like it's on it's turned into something that's on a much.
So the other thing is, it's known for use in mountain climbing and such. But they didn't say that yesterday. What they decided to say yesterday made me really laugh. And I don't think they meant it as a joke, but they said, well, they kind of use it in the World's Strongest Men competition, lifting those boulders. And my big joke about that competition is you always see those guys lifting the boulders and looking like they're going to blow out their hamstring any minute by doing it. And it's just, I don't know. I find that funny, but I couldn't believe that was what
only you would find someone potentially getting catastrophic injury funny.
Listen, why are they lifting a boulder that's three times the size of them for $100,000?
And then their main $100,000. Then their main claim to fame is that they're going to be on a Geico commercial, lifting, because the World's Strong, he's compacting,
Yeah, but tell me, what does the World's Strongest Man ever lead to in life?
Thrones, damn it!
He's wrestling.
Okay.
Wrestling, Game of Thrones, whatever requires amazing feats of lifting strength. This is what they do. I lift things up and I put them down.
Okay. Now you're making fun of them. Okay.
You put snot on the ball? No. Okay.
Oh, Crisco.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So as I normally do in the morning after waking up from a restful sleep, I check Twitter and a couple other websites for anything that happened while I was asleep.
Well, hold on. Before or after a cup of coffee, Michael?
Before. Okay. Yeah. So as I'm perusing, I see a response to a tweet that was put out by the Canadian government yesterday.
Uh-huh.
And it reads, "Good luck to Canada's team, the Montreal Canadiens, as they enter the Final Four of the NHL playoffs tonight and proudly represent us in the hunt for the Stanley Cup. All Canada is behind you. Go Habs, go." Okay? Wrong. Not all of Canada is behind you. The 6 other franchises in Canada, most of their fan base are rooting for you to friggin' lose.
Not all of them, Mike, but
I
can
said
tell
the
you,
majority.
I don't get that feeling.
This is Michael's typical hyperbole.
No, it's Leaf fans because I saw Danglers
and Leafs, exactly, and
Yes.
Leaf centric because
yes.
I think the world revolves around TO.
Yes.
No, but
Definitely.
okay. Okay. Are you telling me that Winnipeg fans or Edmonton fans or Vancouver?
I do think a lot of them were rooting for them. Yeah.
Right. No, this is what happens, and I just wrote about this. So if you want to comment on this on my blog, feel free. You see the good people at CBC who do Hockey Night Canada, and they're always great at their job. And you hear radio hosts, "Oh, let's all unite behind the one remaining Canadian team to break this 28-year streak of futility that has plagued us." No, the fans of the team, like Senators fans, they want their team to end the streak. They don't want the Habs to do it. And by the way,
I have not seen any.
I'm going to tell you this right now. This is what this is. This is Mike being an American.
No.
Himself as a Canadian. He doesn't live in Canada. I don't care if you're miles from the border. This is you being an American.
I'm as Canadian as an American.
Okay.
And here's the level of hypocrisy here. Now, social media did not exist in 1999 or 2002. But to my keen memory, I don't remember the Niagara Falls or the CN Tower being lit up blue and white. I don't remember it being lit up red and white and gold for the Calgary Flames in 2004 or Edmonton in 2006.
No, because you know why? That's a more recent, like 25 year development.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just before the 86 Mets, did cities really start to get those lights and start getting the colorization,
right.
And then later the music, because they made a big deal. And I remember when they lit up the John Hancock building for the Red Sox when they thought they were going to beat the Mets. But before that, it really wasn't a thing. Like there weren't that many. The Empire State Building had it before anybody, but they didn't do it for every team, every moment. But now they do.
Well,
so you just don't like it, Mike.
Well, no. If you're going to do it, if it's a practice to do it every year, there's one Canadian team, then do it for all of them. Don't do it for the stinking Habs.
Well, your team has to get out of the goddamn first round before they do it.
Yeah, well, I know. I knew that was going to be your report, Russ, but that's why I brought up all.
This is the obvious answer.
No, this is why I brought it up. All these teams made it as far as the Canadians made it this year, and I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, the Calgary Tower. Who cares about the Calgary Tower, Flamester?
People in Calgary do.
Right, but I'm talking about the CN Tower and Niagara Falls.
The platform is getting very wobbly, Michael.
You're like one of the Walendas without the net. You're getting ready to go.
By the way, he's walking a tightrope 300 and something feet at some small college in Buffalo, and I'm like, there are so few people who live in that area. If he fell into his death, nobody would know. But anyway, okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021.
I'm Anthony Mingioni.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and Canadian government be fair to all of them. And this is the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. All right. Let's start with the game last night. Vegas, Montreal, game 1. I watched most of it, Russ. I thought it was a pretty entertaining game. Montreal started off fairly strong, but I thought it was sort of like what happened with Tampa at the beginning of their game against the Islanders. It lasted maybe 5-6 minutes, and then Vegas took over. Montreal got into penalty trouble. Vegas scored, and Montreal was trailing for the first time in 7 straight games. And honestly, they didn't know how to recover. They didn't know how to play behind.
Yeah, what I noticed is Montreal's not used to in these playoffs with a team having a lot of extended zone time and their defense having to deal with that. Their defense is used to getting to the puck first and getting it either to the next guy and clearing it out, or skating it out, or having it in there a very short time. They're used to being able to defend Price and the crease to the point nobody can get in it. But what Vegas can do is wear you down. And once they have that half-court game going and they've got the puck in their end, guys like Stone, they know what to do. They know how to get to the net. And they are wearing down the Canadians. They had them out there for long stretches, and I think that's the plan. Now, counter-wise, Montreal, with some of their extra speed, guys like Byron, Suzuki, Caulfield, those guys are going to get their chances. Mm-hmm. And you saw Caulfield bury one. They're going to get shorthanded chances because they are a little faster than Vegas. But Vegas is making sure, and they're putting 4 guys back when they have a lead. Like they had four guys in a box. So it was like that's how they decided to do it. And you know what? I don't know if Montreal can beat that. I don't think they can. I think the rubber has met the road for them.
And I would also say Vegas got their defensemen activated offensively in this game. That was a huge factor here. That puts additional strain, I think, on Montreal's defense and on Price in this circumstance. Price made some really great stops in this.
Yeah, I called it the Ty Webb save where he went no.
But if you're getting
around and made
if Shea Theodore gets activated offensively like he did, that's going to spell big trouble.
To my mind, Anthony, that's not a good sign for Montreal because you could say, okay, we lost game 1 and Price wasn't sharp. Price was extremely sharp. That post-to-post move on, I think it was Marchessault, and the glove save on Stone, and he winks and does the Patrick Waugh thing after it. He was on, and they still gave up 4 goals.
Still got the team in front. Again, the team in front of him is good. It's just but they're entering a whole nother realm. I added to the mix also the fact that, as much as we don't necessarily want to make it a big deal, coming out of the North, playing in Canada all season, coming down into the state, of all places for them to come to the States to play a hockey game, they're in Vegas, who has arguably may have the most pronounced home ice advantage of teams in the National Hockey League.
Now, one thing,
I think they were like Russell Crowe. I think they got tossed into the pit. I do.
Crowe survived at least.
He did. It wasn't easy though.
One thing that I observed, and obviously watching Montreal for 7 games against Toronto, and then seeing the job that Philip Deneau did against Matthews, and I believe he was matched up against Scheifele in game 1, and then they moved him to either Dubois or Paul Stastny in the Winnipeg series. If you look at it, there's not really a center that Deneau can match up with in terms of a shutdown guy because Vegas doesn't really have a number 1 center. I mean, they don't.
Stevenson is, basically their number 1.
And face-off, so luckily he gets that part of it done. He does.
It's different. I will say that about Vegas in terms of but again, when your wing depth is that dominant, like Vegas is, and they could just constantly, and the centers again. DeBoer's got his centers under a very simple thing here: make plays, get them to the start, get the puck to the star players, and they're going to take care of business. So
I have to give them is like a Selke guy every year in my eyes,
right?
And I know that a lot of guys won't vote for wingers for the Selke, but tough because he is.
If anybody was paying attention and watched him for what he did against Nathan McKinnon in the West Final, that's as good as you're going to get in terms of a defensive job on a top-level player who plays at near McDavid's speed. Not quite, but near McDavid's speed and still shut him down.
But if Vegas goes on to win this series and win the Stanley Cup, I find it hard to believe anybody other than Fleury is going to win the Conn Smythe.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you right now.
I think Stone could get. I think Stone has a chance of getting some votes, and certainly I think
don't forget Holden.
Yeah, if Stone scores like 8 goals in the final, then obviously. But Fleury last night, when the game was 2-1, was making spectacular saves. Or 2-1.
Here's the thing with Fleury, considering it might be the most wild ride that a goaltender may have had.
Yes.
If he does win a cup here with Vegas, that kind of a ride to be the focal point of the very first season in Vegas after leaving Pittsburgh, going and having a tremendous run until the final that year. And then we get last year where he loses his job, basically. Yeah. We get the sword meme, and then we bounce back to this.
I'll tell you who I think
It would
he's
be
like.
insane.
I'll tell you, having interviewed him, and he's since passed. Johnny Bauer had a wild ride with multiple teams up and down in the AHL and the NHL. He won.
Well, Russ,
I think it's very similar.
Yeah, in a way, but the funny thing with Bauer is, like, he didn't want to leave the American Hockey League. He was in Cleveland.
Well, because they were paying so well.
They were paying him more, and you know, and that, I mean, throughout his career with the Leafs, I mean, he won the 4 Stanley Cups, but the last one in '67, he was basically sharing duty with Sawchuk, and Sawchuk was the one who was in the last 3 or 4 games of the series, I think. So at that point, he sort of got relegated to being a backup, but
he had a wild ride too.
He had a wild ride, but with Fleury, it was first overall pick, win a Stanley Cup in '09, and then, you know, losing to Montreal in 2010. The disaster against Philadelphia in 2012, you know, basically almost getting run out of Pittsburgh. And then there's this ascendancy with him coming back, you know, him winning the 2 cups, one as a backup, one sort of sharing it with Murray. And now what he's done in Vegas, I don't know of any other player in any other sport that had a second act that is as fantastic as Fleury has.
Just to answer one thing that Funky's saying in the chat room, because they're chatting about prospects. I don't think Luke Hughes is skating yet. I haven't seen any evidence of it. That's all. Move on.
So the other thing, it doesn't sound like, it sounds iffy whether Petrie is going to come back for game 2. And I heard Elliot Friedman observe that he thought that Shea Weber was showing some of the ill effects of the hand injury that he's been dealing with through 3 rounds. So if you got a low percentage Shea Weber and a low percentage Jeff Petrie, if he comes back in game 2, that's big. That's a big.
It's asking a lot of, again, and I've liked what I've seen out of Alexander Romanov. We all know how good he can.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he didn't play until 2 games ago is on Ducharme, because you see there is no problem with him, and you know,
he's got fresh legs now.
Yeah, he does. Mike thinks Pietrangelo was off balance. I'm not sure of that. I think Pietrangelo actually needs to get stronger in this league, because I think guys have gotten to the point now where, because I saw it with Kulak too, he kind of, you know, face washed Kulak a little bit, but he couldn't really move him. And I think he needs to elevate himself.
He's never been that kind of defense.
I know, but I think he's going to have to be if he wants to continue to play at that level, because Romanov just decked him.
I just watched it again. Pietrangelo was trying to make an inside move, so he cut to the left, and as he cut, Romanov hit him legal chest.
Yeah, no, it was legal. Yeah.
It was a legal hit, but he caught him as he was turning, and at that point, you're basically off balance. So. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
just to be
it was a nice hit. It was a nice hit, and it was early. It was early in the game, and it could have been a momentum change.
Again, those are like talking about like the height and size differential in this case. I said I've seen smaller. It's all about leverage.
It is about leverage.
It's about leverage, and if you power into a guy, I don't care how big he is, you can get him off balance.
Listen, there's a kid in the draft, Sean Barons. He hits everybody, and I want to say he's 5'9". So
do you remember
he's a defenseman.
Do you remember the hits that Darius Kasparaitis threw when he was with the Islanders and with the Penguins? He was what, 5'10", 5'11"?
Ask Eric Lindros what it was like to get whacked by Darius Kasparaitis.
I will say he had a special kind of strength, Mike, and I will leave it at that.
Yes, he did. Okay, let's move on to some news that has occurred since our show yesterday. Finally, a coach. The Columbus had hired their coach, Brad Larson, on the weekend, but one of the big names finally came off the board, Russ, and it was the Rangers and Gerard Gallant on a 4-year contract, believed to be $3.5 million a year, which, by the way, folks, is less than what Ralph Kruger got in Buffalo. So a reasonable amount for a very good coach. What did you think, Russ?
Yeah, he's an excellent coach. I mean, there's a couple things. I'm glad that they didn't go the Torts way, because I was thinking they might. Just because we didn't see that he was officially interviewed didn't mean they didn't call him. Maybe Torts just doesn't want to coach for a little while. That's possible too.
He doesn't want to do with Larry Brooks on a regular basis again.
So that was good. You know, the Messier thing, maybe it was something for a little while and that went away. So that's an interesting thing. So as far as the guy, there's no question he's a great coach. There's no question he can motivate. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he can handle New York. I want to hear him in his press conference sort of handle these kinds of questions from the press, because he's never been in a market like this as the head coach. Montreal, he was an assistant. So way different than when you're the guy. And when you're the guy in New York, you do, even though hockey may be down on the rung in New York, you are still going to have to answer to the press and to a tough fan base. And that's something where I want to see how he deals with it, because going back and looking at old quotes, the fact that he felt like he was blindsided when he got fired by Vegas, when he was called to Kelly McCrimmon's room and, basically got fired in a hotel or whatever it was, that tells me that he kind of was working in his own bubble, which at times is good because you get everybody to buy in and your voice is the main voice, and that's fine. But it does kind of worry you that how do you not have an inkling that things may not be going right that way and your job could be in trouble? Because look, I know I've been in jobs before when I know, things, especially in the hotel business where it could be a cutthroat business, things aren't going great. I could get fired here, even though I'm doing my best, but the numbers aren't there or whatever. He really didn't have a feel that he was even going to get fired. And so that's something that makes me want to say, all right, I just want to see how he works out in that market in that way. I don't worry about his hockey stuff. I worry about the other stuff. And I go back to early on with Torts, like when he squirted that fan with the water bottle. I don't think Gallant will do anything like that, but Gallant seems like a short fuse kind of guy. That's
Russ, what do you believe is the expectation? What is the Gallant effect that will be on the Rangers?
They're expecting to make the playoffs next year.
And in terms of stylistically,
they're trying to they want a speed team. There's no question. They want their young guys to be a part of that. They want Kakko, Lafreniere to be a part of that, Kravtsov. So they do want to see all of them sort of playing that way. Gallant's wingers and centers take a lot of shots. And if you're taking a lot of shots, the other team doesn't have the puck a lot. And so I do think that's where he used to sort of get away with, and especially skating the puck out too. They like skating it out of the zone. They were able to get away with not having the best defensemen in the league, but their forwards did a lot of work. They did a lot of heavy lifting. And so I think you might see the Rangers trade for a forward or two that could do that. Like Ryan Strome has turned into a really well-rounded player, and he does a lot of that. Zibanejad does more now than he ever has in his career. Kakko isn't bad defensively, actually, and Lafreniere, when he's fully comfortable with the league, is pretty good that way too. So it wouldn't shock me if they get like a defensive-minded forward that they can kind of put out there and help with that. Because a guy like Brett Howden, I think he's just overmatched. So maybe they need to get like another 4C that could really do that. Defensively, he's got more to work with than he did in Vegas, but they're younger.
Right.
And so that's, like Adam Fox, you don't worry about. He's Norris Trophy candidate kind of guy. Keandre Miller made great strides. Mm-hmm. And so that's another guy that could really move up the chain this year. And so if you could get those guys to play reasonably good defense, because they all could skate, that's going to be a big thing. Niels Lundqvist, they just signed. He could make the team. He's a good all-around defenseman, but he hasn't played in North America, right? So maybe he needs a little time in Hartford. We'll see about that. But I do think that's what they're looking at.
But the window here, when you have Brendan Smith dropping off, you have Trouba signed long-term. You've got three defensemen who are basically in your top four, Miller, Lindgren, and Fox, who are still all on their ELCs. Their opportunity is in the next 2 years, and the hire of Gallant is sort of aimed toward that. I
think 2 to 3. I think that's sort of what they are looking at. Shesterkin will make strides, but again, they're going to have a big roadblock. The Islanders give them fits, and the Islanders have the kinds of players, veteran-wise and otherwise, right, that win corner battles. There's that whole division. We've talked about it. There's tremendous goaltending in that division.
And that's where they're really going to they're going to have to match the Islanders' work ethic, or
that's hard to do.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do it, but I don't know whether you can do it with the lineup as currently constituted up front. I
don't think you can.
You have to get guys who can answer the Matt Martins and the Cizicases and the Clutterbucks. I mean, Cizikas is a free agent. It's not above the Rangers to steal a guy like Cizikas away from the Islanders.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. The Islanders really love Cizikas, and I think he's staying there. But like everybody in the chat room saying, hey, the Rangers, may lose Kakko in the Eichel deal. If there is an Eichel deal, I could see someone like that in there. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Rangers are going to spend great assets to try and get Jack Eichel. Would they not want him? Yes. Do they need him? Sure. Every team needs him. But Zibanejad has turned into a really good 1C, and they have to sign him. So he's not going to make $10 million a year, where Eichel is making $10 million a year. So unless you get the Sabres to eat a fair portion of the contract for at least a couple of seasons, I don't know if they're going to go after that. I think they're going to go in a different direction, honestly.
Anthony, it's curious that, over the last, week, after Elliot Friedman made the statement on Buffalo radio that the Sabres don't want Eichel, they want to move on. A statement came out of LA that the Kings are not interested in Eichel. And now, I'm sure if the Rangers are sending out signals that they're not going to be willing to pay the big price to get Eichel, this is a situation where Buffalo is going to be pigeonholed where, we want to move him, but now teams are going to say, well, shave a little bit off the $10 million.
Well, they're all going to do that. Every team is going to do that.
Every team is going to do that, right?
And that's where the inexperience of Kevin Adams could kill the Sabres.
Right, and this is where if you're leaking that kind of information out then if you're the other general manager, like, okay, you don't want him. He's an unwanted. If he's an unwanted asset, well,
they cannot repeat the Ryan O'Reilly deal.
But they might. That's the problem. They're boxing themselves in right now.
They can't.
Like Funky's got a great point. Remember the Rick Nash trade? Mm-hmm. Great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sticking with the Sabres here for a second, Lance Lasowski, who covers the Sabres for the Buffalo News, said that he has heard from multiple sources that the Devils are interested in Rasmus Ristolainen, who obviously has been mentioned in trade rumors, last 4 years maybe, but at least. Now, Ristolainen's got 1 year left in his contract at, I believe, $5.75 million, which – he's a big right-handed defenseman. I mean, there's a lot of things to be attracted about in terms of, and he actually had a really good year until he got hit with $5.4 million. He actually was having a really good year until he got COVID and then came back and was not the same player. But I think, obviously we'll recover, at least we hope. And, with 1 year left in his contract, you look, Russ, at the Devils, Ryan Murray's contract is up.
Up now or up after next year?
It's up after this year. He's a free agent. And Subban and Will Butcher are up after next year. So
Butcher will be interesting. I think they're 50-50 on him. Subban's not re-signing. They don't want him. That we know. I don't know if they're going to be able to re-sign Ristolainen because my guess is wherever he goes, he is just going to try to drive up his price for when he is a free agent. So
he's in a prove it stage right now.
But he can prove it. Like I think he's good enough that he can.
We'll see. Again, he needs to get out. Again, he needs to get out of Buffalo and be able and prove it because at the moment, I mean, again, classic situation. This is just like what the Sabres have done with Rasmus Dahlin. Rush a guy too soon, have him in too soon, and they're just not quite ready. They're not ready to swim. And they're both obviously headstrong both Dahlin and Ristolainen pretty headstrong, very headstrong. But
I'll tell you what I could see going down here, but I don't know. And I think he makes less money than even Ristolainen does. Would you see a Severson for Ristolainen deal? Because Severson had another good year for the Devils, but for some reason they don't let him play really the spot he's supposed to play in hockey. It always seems to be askew with the Devils, and I think he plays somewhere else, he could be a much better player than he's been in New Jersey. And I could see that kind of trade happening.
Well, I mean, I think the Sabres would do it.
Because he has more term too, right?
Yeah, he has term, and we know that. Let's see, he's got 2 more years at 4.16, so they would save a little over $1 million in cap space. But that's
a fair deal, I think.
It's a fair deal, but it's the question is, in the circumstances, are there other deals where I think they could potentially get if they are looking to move? Say if they are looking to move Severson, maybe it's not a 1-for-1 thing where Severson is sent, and they get better assets elsewhere in order to.
It's right-hand shot for right-hand shot, too, which is...
Yeah, I mean, they're getting a right-hand shot defenseman who can play in their top pairing for Buffalo. Like, I don't know what else. And if you don't want him in the top pairing, you can make him your number 3, but he can play in the top pairing. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that you would pass on, because I know what you're saying it, but when you're getting assets, you're going to be more hoping these other guys can do something. You're not going to get 3 proven assets for Ristolainen. You might get 2, and 1 is half proven. That's possible, but I don't know if you can get as good a deal like that.
Well, as Mir says, it makes no sense. If New Jersey doesn't like Severson,
I don't think they value Severson. I think that's the issue. They've shown me that by the way they play him.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in his column today, said that there was some chatter about Sam Reinhart. I mean, that makes sense. And now this is the thing. If you're the Sabres and you're trading Eichel, Reinhart, and Ristolainen all in one offseason, you're setting yourself up for the top pick in 20.
Of course you are.
So this is rebuild number 2, and we know that there are franchise level forwards coming in the next couple drafts.
Bedard, sure.
Bedard and what was it? Shane Wright.
Shane Wright. Both of them are tremendous.
Yeah. So I mean, they could be. I mean, the thing is, fans in Buffalo are getting fed up, and we haven't heard anything in terms of their hiring of a coach. We did hear that Gallant was not on Buffalo's list. He had not been interviewed for the Buffalo job. Whoever takes the Buffalo job, it could be Tocchet, because Tocchet was interviewed by them before, is going to have to be a developmental coach. There's no 2 ways about it. You cannot go – to me, that rules out a guy like Boudreau, because I think Boudreau is somebody, if you come in, he's
– there's not enough veterans for Boudreau there.
Right. And I think they've crossed the Rubicon, Anthony, when it came to Eichel and the other 2. I think all 3 of them want out, and I think it's just a question of when. Maybe they hold off on Ristolainen until the deadline, when the return for defensemen is greater. But I think all 3 of them are gone before the end of next year.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. I think that's going to be. They need a reset. Again, this is a Sabres team that needs a reset. They tried to accelerate timelines, and that was a mistake. And they thought they were going to be able to move things along quicker than they did. Didn't work out. They tried, between Stahl, between other acquisitions, Hall last year.
I'll tell you who the Sabres are.
There's just this scatter shot, and I get it. They were trying to get the window, open up a bigger, a better window with Eichel being their focal point. But now, where are you as a team if you're moving off Eichel? You're back right where you were before.
What's interesting to me is it seems like the Sabres are turning into like the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team like that where, they had some years that were good, and then it just kept, every year it's like, when's it going to be their year? When's it going to be their year? Or the Clippers when they were really bad.
There's no way the Rangers give up this much.
Oh my God! I'm looking at this trade. I'm like,
no, sorry, Goalie. I'm sorry, Frank.
Seriously?
No way.
No, they won't have anybody to play.
I know what the person's trying to do. They're trying to get the salary situation matched perfectly.
Doesn't matter.
No.
That's not a factor here, because the Rangers are $23 million under the cap, and I think
and this is again, if you're trying to do a budget, but again, why would the Rangers?
They're not going to do that.
You're gutting. No,
they're not going to do that.
Russ, we want to talk a little bit about some draft stuff, but I want to segue into this because.
And by the way, one other thing: how many times we're going to see in this day and age that many players and a pick for one guy?
Yeah, this is not the Eric Lindros.
And a guy who has not even sniffed the damn playoffs yet,
and may miss 2 months because of an operation that's risky.
Right. We talked about the Bruins 3 picks in 2015 and how that had a domino effect. Cam Neely came out with a statement, and I don't know who asked him this, but it's Evan Marinovsky, I believe, covers the Bruins, who tweeted this out. Cam Neely on the 2015 NHL draft. I've looked back at that a lot, obviously. The timing of when we hired Don and when the draft took place, I think it would have been good to have a little more time between the hiring and the draft. So he's blaming the late hiring of Don Sweeney. All you had to do was open up the NHL Central scouting book, for Christ's sake.
That's all you had to do.
Better picks. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean,
I'm sorry. I like Cam. There's no looking good with that. The only looking good is the rest of the draft. Carlo, Lawson, Vladar, good picks.
Yeah.
Those are all really good picks.
Yeah, the remaining picks, absolutely. But you had literally a chance to set your team up for 15 years.
Yes.
Potentially with the players that were available.
Well, you just look at the next two that went, Barzal and Kyle Connor.
Right.
Yeah.
And Shabbat.
Yeah, and Shabbat. And again, Shabbat was a known thing. For the people that like Zaboral better, I just feel like they weren't paying attention. I really do. And to prove that, I have like a soundbite of me from like an off the post from 2015 talking about that draft and a few of those players. And so at some point I'm going to –
Guys, as I said to you, whenever you feel like dropping said soundbite, Russell.
I might drop it today. I haven't had a moment, but I'm going to do it.
No, you probably should hold it in reserve for when we start doing the draft show. We do the draft. We start getting ready to do the draft show. Listen to Uncle Russ, kiddies.
No, but it's interesting because if like someone like me feels that way pre-draft,
yes. Why
couldn't anybody in Boston or like Keith Gretzky? He didn't even mention Keith Gretzky's name, did he?
No, not in that quote. No.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know.
Was it a sin of omission or commission?
Does that mean
he hired Keith Gretzky? Or I don't know.
Well, he was there in 2011, so I'm assuming he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
he didn't want to mention that. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that with Sweeney coming in at a late time, as Neely is saying, that means that, Keith Gretzky being, I believe he was the director of amateur scouting, probably would have had complete control over the draft. And if that's the case, then he should have been fired because of those 3 picks. And you said he's a great guy, nice guy, and what he's doing. But here, this is 3 strikes and you're out.
Well, he was out in 2016, so.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where.
Just one other thing before we talk a little draft stuff, and then we'll talk the preview of the Islanders and Tampa. Elliot Friedman talked about the Dougie Hamilton situation. I have to correct something from yesterday when we were saying, now it is true, when a player is traded before the deadline, the team that he's traded to can sign him to an 8-year contract.
Actually, Mike Chiarelli hired him, and so he started working on the draft for the Bruins from 2014 on.
Okay. If you're traded after the deadline, like your rights are traded, like we've seen for draft picks, the team that the player is traded to, in this instance, Dougie Hamilton, can only sign a 7-year contract. The only team he can sign an 8-year contract, a max deal, is with Carolina, because Carolina has him now. Now, the sign and trade that everybody's talking about is Carolina signing him as an agreement with the other team and then swapping him to the other team, and he has the 8 years. But the thing is, and this has come up, I've heard this scenario play out, all the speculation about Tavares and Stamkos wanting the 8th year. The player is going to agree to a contract with a no-move clause and then agrees to waive the no-move clause.
It's we don't see these trades because this kind of sign and trade, because it takes a lot of negotiating and a lot of time that they don't really have right now. This is a shorter offseason than normal, and they're not going to have that kind of time to hammer this out and get it done.
I thought Tom Dundon was an amazing businessman who can make deals in lightning quick.
Tom Dundon's not going to be the one that hammers it out.
I know.
You know that, and I know that.
I'm being facetious.
I'm just saying, it's one of those things that's very time consuming. And so I think it's going to be the same old Carolina trade for draft rights for a pick. And I think that's what you're going to see if it happens. If
at all. Now, the one thing that Friedman said.
One other thing, I would say one of the reasons why this thing is getting leaked right now is they're trying to avoid that scenario, but they're trying to see if they can drum the market up before we see the inevitable happen.
Well, the two things that Friedman talked about in terms of the Hamilton situation. One, he would not be surprised if Seattle with Ron Francis, even though Ron Francis was not the person who brought in Hamilton. I think it was after he was let go that he was, but somebody who was in analytics with the Hurricanes is in Seattle. He's an analytics darling. Plus, he has built his teams from the defense out.
Mm-hmm.
You see the product of that in Carolina with Slavin and Pesce.
Yeah.
So that would indicate that Seattle might be in on Hamilton in terms of signing him as a free.
Yeah, I said that yesterday. I think there's potential if he wants to go there. They have the money, and I think if he's
the environment,
a 7-year deal, then they'll get good during that deal.
And the other thing, Anthony, was he said that Philadelphia is not really in on Hamilton. That it's now I don't know if he said it was not a good fit, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a
good fit either.
I would concur. I know there's a lot of Flyer fans who would prefer Hamilton over, say, Seth Jones.
Yeah, I don't know why.
But I don't. I
guess it's points driven. I
think it's points driven, but it's also, I think, the fact that they look at it signing him as a free agent and being able to keep other assets versus trading assets in order to get Jones and then signing Jones to a contract. That's, I think, where Flyer fans are right now with regards to preferring Hamilton over Jones. But you also have underlying numbers as well. Hamilton is an underlying numbers darling, whereas Jones's recent performance with Columbus this past season hasn't been great. But how much of that is team effect versus player effect is something that could be legitimately debated.
I already have a count of 13 museums.
I'm not surprised at all if that information is accurate in terms of the Flyers not having as much interest in Hamilton.
I already have.
It's got to be a match. It's not just the numbers. It's got to be also. It's got to be the right. I think it has to be the right match in this.
I agree
with the player.
I agree. I have a count of 13 just in my first search of museums in Seattle, so they're loaded with museums. There's no worry there.
I think I think for Hamilton that would actually be a perfect spot for him.
I do too.
In terms of it all depends on where he's at. Again, we could look at the Vegas situation and say, well, you could go on the fly very quickly, but. And maybe the environment now allows for a quicker turnaround to get your team into.
It probably does. And look, we have to.
I wouldn't count on it per se.
We have to take into account these shortened seasons that Hamilton's getting 10, 11 goals and 40, 45 points are like 70-point seasons in a full 82-game season. So he's one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, but I do think he's below average defensively, but he does have the puck a lot and he shoots the puck a lot. And so on a team like Seattle, that's perfect because he could be the highest scoring defenseman on that team. He'll probably take the most shots on that team. And that's fine. I mean, that's a good way to start.
Now, Russ, you interviewed a 2021 draft prospect, an Ohio native. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Dylan Duke. Last couple of days I've interviewed Dylan Duke and Tyler Boucher, Brian Boucher's son. And the Boucher it's a written piece that'll be up on EP Ringside shortly, I think next couple days. I put up the Dylan Duke one yesterday on Sportsology. So some interesting things. The first one was he did talk about playing with Owen Power and Matty Beniers next year in Michigan. And I left it open-ended. I left it like, hey, maybe Owen Power is there. And he didn't skip a beat talking about playing with him there. So I really do feel like Owen Power is going back to Michigan, regardless of who takes him. And so I think that as we get closer to the draft, that's going to become a more known thing. And that's fine. I would love to see Power go 1, Beniers go 2, and let them both go back. And let's see how that works out because that never happens in the NHL. And I think that's a positive thing to do this year. And I think it's a good thing to do because a lot of kids do get rushed. But getting back to Duke, go ahead, Anthony. You want to say something? I'm
just saying, again, with such a strange season and a short window in the circumstance, I think I agree with you. I think it's probably more likely that the player also may feel more comfortable being in that program, at least having, getting at least another full year.
They're going to have a super team there. And I get it. Playing like with Buffalo would be nice, but if things aren't good in Buffalo and you get sent to Rochester, would Owen Power rather be in Rochester or would he rather be in Michigan where he's the guy on campus with a bunch of great players? And by the way, Dylan Duke will be one of them. And so I just think he'd rather do that. Another thing about Duke is, he would like to get a Zoom call from the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I feel that's interesting because we always talk about Columbus needs players that want to play there. Well, he wants to play there. He grew up there, and then he eventually went to Michigan to start playing higher level hockey, as a lot of players do. But he has family there, and he goes back, and he's a big Browns fan. And this kid plays in the crease. He does dirty area stuff. He is very well aware of like all the players that have ever been drafted in the NHL from Ohio. It seems like a really good match. Columbus has 3 first-rounders. Like I can't imagine they wouldn't call him. But again, I am going to go back to something I learned in business a very long time ago from a very smart guy named Doug Lott. And this was back when I was in the video game business. And he taught me something that I did port over to sports. And Anthony, I know you'll agree with this because you see it happen a lot. He always used to say, take care of what's in your backyard first. Look in your backyard, see what's there. And he meant like as in talent and competition. Guys you could hire, what's the competition doing? And a lot of times teams fail in this area. They have players playing in their area, and they never scout them enough, and they don't consider them enough to actually draft them. It happens in football a lot. And I know you've seen it happen in football a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so, absolutely. But it happens in sports a lot, and it's one of those things. And I just find it fascinating that it does happen. So anyhow, kid's got a great attitude. You can go to Sportsology and read it. Now, Tyler Boucher is an interesting one because he has the brain of Brian Boucher, but he has the body of a 6'2", 200-pound power forward. And, that makes an interesting combination because you could tell he's a son of a former athlete. And you could also tell he is a guy that's gotten top training. He went to Old Avon Farms. He is going to go to BU. So things have been carefully crafted. He's at the NTDP as well with Duke. Duke's like his best friend. He's another guy that plays in the crease, but he wants to play like Tom Wilson. And again, that tracks with Brian as a player. Brian had a pretty fiery attitude. So that's that from father to son. I think that's certainly that. And what's interesting about it is if you think about it, in this draft, that's a commodity. There's not a lot of guys you could look at in this draft and say, hey, if down the road we want a player like that, and it's not like Ryan Reeves. It's a guy who actually can score, but could also dish it out and become a target and take guys out of plays. And if you want that kind of guy, which will take a few years to develop, no question, but his skating's really good already. I think one of the things I sort of mentioned to him is I feel like the puck needs to get off his stick a little quicker when he's in the crease, but I'm sure that will happen because he's been getting top training. And I guarantee you when he goes to BU, that'll start to change.
Well, I mean, he's coming out in the absolute perfect draft after a season where the 4 teams in the Stanley Cup semifinals are all what you define as heavy teams.
Yeah.
Now, he's not a defenseman. He's a forward, correct?
No, he's a forward.
Okay, but
he's a winger.
You've got 4 teams with big, rangy defensemen. And the way to combat that is with big, rangy, tough forwards who can like doing what Vegas did last night to Montreal. That guys like Kolasar and Stevenson were slamming Kulak and Romanov and the other Montreal defensemen into the backboards, and they beat on them until I think they wore them down. You need players like that. So coming out in this draft is probably very beneficial for him.
It is, and Boucher is a really good golfer, or at least he tells me he is. Told me that Duke was a really bad golfer, and Duke had a different story. So there's a little back and forth going there. I've been emailing with Tyler about it, and it's a good little rivalry. Even Tyler, plays in Stone Harbor with his dad, and he says he could beat his dad. He didn't say how often, so it's interesting because I think Brian's probably a pretty good golfer too, and so he's a very competitive kid. And Dylan Duke too. Like there's a story on the website where Dylan Duke played roller hockey during the break with his brother. His brother is a draft eligible guy for next year, Tyler. So again, and this is funny, and Anthony, you would know about this too. he was just talking about playing roller hockey, but he mentioned that he was the older brother with my younger brother. And I immediately said to him, because he said he pushed him, I said, I hope you understand, me being a younger brother, when the older brother tends to push, the younger brother tends to get pissed off.
Yeah.
Because the older brother tends to, and you know what? Sure enough, that's what the little stuff is about, like what came about after that. And if you have,
I'm an older brother, so it's just
if you have like older sibling or whatever, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know that very well. Okay, drifting off of that, couple things here. One, Joe McDonald, who covers the Bruins, he heard that the Sabres wanted to interview Jack Capuano, who's an assistant to DJ Smith in Ottawa, but the
Sens that one right in a DM though. I didn't tweet it.
What's that?
I guessed it right. The other day there were clues as to who the Sabres were looking at, and I broke the code. And I broke the code to Joe Yurden on a DM, and Jack Capuano was one of them.
But the Sens would not grant the Sabres,
right, which is crazy,
which is ridiculous. But
well, we know that again, it's in division.
Yes,
that gets a little dicey. You're gonna make a guy.
It does, but you still shouldn't hold back a guy.
I agree, but I think if Jack was, I do believe that if this was in a different division, it was elsewhere, a team that might not.
I think Jack's Buffalo is a perfect fit.
But see, the thing is,
you know it, and I know it.
That's a bad. I don't mean to attack Jack Capuano, but his record with the Islanders was not great.
Oh, look, he had a lot of things working against him. Jack Capuano can coach.
Okay,
I think
Gordon. So did Scott Gordon. I mean, there's a lot as a long stretch here where we had coaches who went with the Islanders and.
Yeah, there were bad times there with the Islanders front office trying to get players. There were a lot of things going on. Garth did some good things, and he did a lot of bad things too. And I don't hold that on Jack Capuano. I saw a very competitive coach who got guys to play hard for him.
Well, I mean, Garth laid the groundwork for the team that is succeeding right now. I mean, really, all Lou did was, at the 11th hour, lose Tavares, but Tavares left because
Okay, but how many years did it take to lay that groundwork, and how many bad drafts did they have until they started to lay that groundwork? Mike, remember the draft where they drafted all defensemen? Well, remember that draft? Joe Morello remembers, I'm sure.
How about Griffin Reinhart, 4th overall? I mean, but for every Anthony Beauvillier, and you have a Griffin Reinhart. So
the all defenseman draft. I have to say something about that because there's not that many things that blow my mind at a draft. But when they drafted all defensemen, it almost seemed like they were going out of their way to do it. And it's like, I get it. If you feel like you need some defensemen in your system, sure. But there were times there were better players on the board, and it just seemed like that was the plan, and it wasn't the best player available for them. And it just was crazy. Like, you're never going to see that ever again where a team drafts all defensemen. I'm telling you.
Well, I mean, it's bizarre, and I'm curious here. Oh, yeah, it was 2012, and that was the Griffin Reinhart.
That was the Reinhart draft. Yeah.
It was the Reinhart draft. Pellick was one of them.
Yeah, and Pellick's great.
But that's what they were hoping for. They're like, can we get at least 2 guys that we can put on our blue line?
Right, 2 out of like 6 or 7.
We get at least 2 guys out of all of our picks. Yeah, but what about the other positions, guys?
Right.
Oops.
Right.
Yeah.
Oops.
The other thing, Russ, and it was publicly out on Twitter, so I think it's okay to talk about it. The little tete-a-tete going on between Matthew Barnaby and Sean Avery.
Yes.
I'm
on Team Barnaby.
He's in a pod.
It goes back to their playing days, and apparently Barnaby said that Avery never would fight him. And look, Sean Avery was not a good fighter. He was a great agitator.
Yes.
And Barnaby wasn't a great fighter either, but he fought everybody.
Yes.
He was unafraid to fight anybody, and he would get the crap beat out of him, and once in a while he would win, and he'd be the first to tell you that. But the fact is, Sean Avery is probably, 10 years younger than Barnaby?
Yes.
And Barnaby is still game to have like a roughhouse, whatever that means in Canada.
Are they going to rent a barn?
But if they do one of those, again, celebrity-ish boxing.
Oh, that would be a junior circuit barn fight, considering the previous barn fight that was suggested by the general managers.
Happened. Yeah.
But I'm telling you, I will take Matt Barnaby in this because even though he talks, he is more action than talk compared to Avery, where he's always been more talk than action. That's just my feeling.
By the way,
if you want to ever know about Sean Avery, ask Marty Turco about him.
Oh, and please.
In Dallas. If you want to, I was at the game.
How long did he last? It was literally that like less than a season?
I was in Philly.
Yeah.
And I was at the game where he got ejected. Avery, remember he got ejected from the locker room, and I saw Avery walking around the concourse of the building that day.
I'm pretty sure that the only reason that he ended up in Dallas was because of Brett Hull, because he was teammates with Brett Hull in Detroit. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that Dallas ever made, was bringing him in there. So, yeah. By the way, just the Islanders thing, I was looking it up because I remember hearing the story that they took a goaltender in the 7th round that was somebody that was on nobody's radar. It was essentially that he was it was like a favor that Garth did to it was Cody Rosen, who was a goalie at Clarkson. The guy was the backup at Clarkson. I think he played 7 games in his senior year, and then only played in the SPHL. So he never even played ECHL or AHL. So it wasn't even good enough to play professional hockey.
We should block Joe Morello just for saying, like, I've never talked about Dylan McElrath or Hugh Jessamine. I knew at the minute they drafted those guys, they were horrible picks.
Yeah,
I told people. I didn't have a problem telling anybody.
We're talking about 4th overall with Griffin Reinhart. Now that was a bad draft. Yakupov, Brian Murray's injuries have hurt him.
But there still were players to get.
Galchenyuk has been up and down. Then Griffin Reinhart and Morgan Riley was 5th overall, so they passed on Morgan Riley. All right, tonight we have game 2, Islanders Tampa. As I said yesterday, it was a perfect Islanders road game.
It was.
And they still only won 2-1. Now, I think Tampa is going to step it up. We both predicted it was going to be a long series.
Yeah.
But even if Tampa falls down behind 2-0, I still think they could win the series. But obviously, they don't want to go down 2-0 going to Nassau Coliseum. No,
I don't think so either. I mean, that would indicate to me Tampa's really on their heels, that the Islanders are dictating the series to them. While I did on Off the Post Radio was the only person in the panel who picked the Islanders to win the series in 7. I expect this to be a back and forth series, and the pendulum, I think, will swing to Tampa in this game. I do believe Tampa will win game 2. Do I think it'll be another tight one or a good chance of a tight one? I do think there's a chance, but they could also. I look at this game as either close Tampa win or Tampa really, figures things out here in game 2 and puts a hurting on the Islanders for game 2 to at least create some doubt going back to Nassau. If it's a tight game 2 win, then in this circumstance, and it's going to be a back. Then we know that then I think the Islanders still feel like you're going to come out of Tampa winning the first game and having a tightly contested second game that you might lose by a goal. That gives the Islanders a lot of confidence heading back to Nassau. Whereas in this case,
going to have confidence anyhow. Like, they're a confident team.
But I mean, especially in this circumstance, against a team that, if you think about it, is a substantial ramp up in competition level to the previous 2 teams that they played.
Look, I think all these games are going to be close because I think the Islanders play it that way, and it's very hard to destroy the Islanders and win 5-1. Like, you have to work exceptionally hard to do that, or goalie's got to give up some really bad goals. And Varlamov's not been doing that. Varlamov's been really good. That's why we told Ek we didn't think Sorokin was going to be the guy this series. Ek was sort of trying to match the goalie for the level of the team, but forgetting that, hey, Varlamov has been having a great year and maybe his best year on record. And so I'm not shocked that he's playing like that. I think Barzal goal was a goal that it's very rare that you could make Vasilevsky look bad, and he did. And that's the magic of Matt Barzal. And I thought that was a tremendous goal. I just think, Tampa, I think, didn't play the way you would expect Tampa to play. I think that's partially because of the Islanders and partially because what the coach said. I do feel like there were times where they had checked out I don't know why, but when they were fighting in the third, if you're an Islander fan, there's no chance you thought that game was a walkaway when it was 2-1. You were still worried because they were still getting shots on net, and that's what these games are going to be like, and it'll be like that if Tampa's leading too. And I don't think Hedman's banged up enough yet that I'm going to worry about them with Hedman. And I just feel like Stamkos getting benched was a moment where, because of that turnover, it led to a goal that might fire him up. So could Tampa go down to 2-0 and win? Sure, because they've been winning on the road, and there have been plenty of teams that have won down 2-0. But yeah, they don't want to get that way. So I think you'll see a better effort out of them for sure.
And one thing, it was funny because I talked about yesterday about Vasilevsky he can't let in that Pulak goal. And
I disagree. I don't think there's much he could do there. I don't.
Well, apparently on 31 Thoughts, Friedman talked to Kevin Woodley, who's a hockey goalie expert, and said that the analytics on Vasilevsky on long clear shots are terrible. So, it's something that he has trouble with.
Okay, but if Josh Bailey's winding up on a long clear shot and Ryan Pulak's lining up on a long clear shot, there is a difference for reaction time. And I love Kevin. I wrote for In Goal magazine, and he taught me a lot. And he is the master. But again, there is a big difference. Your reaction time isn't great when Pulak is winding up there. It's an elite shot.
Don't get me wrong. He gets it over 100 miles an hour. He's got a blast that's consistent with McInnes. I'm just saying, if you're an NHL goalie, like Kevin said yesterday, if you're an NHL goalie and it's a clear shot, you've got to stop it.
Okay, that's easy to say, but again, he did make partial contact with it. It wasn't like he whiffed on it.
Yeah, it got through him. Now the other thing was, and we talked about it, and a lot of people talked about it at the beginning of the series, was the key matchup would be Tampa Bay's power play against the Islanders' penalty kill, which has been bad, especially against Boston. They allowed a lot of power play goals. I think it was the only power play that Tampa Bay had was late in the third period when Point scored the goal. So the risky thing about the Islanders playing that aggressive style that they do is if they get penalties, they're going to be in trouble, especially against that power play.
Yeah, I like Morello. Just to answer in the chat room, he hasn't ever attacked us. He's a good guy. It's all just in fun. But I will say, you do have to worry about Point. He did get at least 2 shots where he outskated the Islanders defense and got shots.
You almost dropped in a flyer.
I know. But did he hit the crossbar on one of them? I forget now. But Braden Point did have a couple of chances that way on the rush. And, well, you know why? Because the Flyers gave up so many chances that way.
We had front row seats for that, Russ.
We had front row seats for that. But I do think you have to worry about Point because that's a guy that when he really gets it going, he can be a guy that's very hard to cover, even harder than anybody else on that team, honestly.
All right, guys, great show. I'm heading in a couple hours to go see the Yankees and the Blue Jays in Buffalo.
There you go.
Fully prepared to see the Yankees get poleaxed because, the way the Blue Jays have been hitting and the way the Yankees have been playing, it's probably going to be a waste of $150. But
say hi to the peanut guy.
Expectations are low. That's good, Mike. So you'll be pleasantly surprised when the Yankees win.
Send my best to the peanut guy.
I'm not passing a cemetery, Russ. For Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Lagello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.